For more, I am joined by political journalist John Fund. John Fund, thank you so much for coming here tonight. Now, John, we saw this big protest outside the DNC headquarters. It took a violent turn with the demonstrators calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. There's been arrests. What did you make of these scenes, and how is the Israel-Gaza conflict starting to cause real fractures on the left and in the Democratic Party?
Well, one of the truisms in Washington is that the media covers dissension or disagreements within a political party completely differently depending on which party it is. Every disagreement or schism in the Republican Party is dissected and analyzed to a fare thee well. Democrats basically keep their mouths shut, and reporters who might hear their private complaints don't really publicize them that much. But there are enormous fissures in the Democratic Party, and the Hamas attacks of October 7th and the Israeli response have brought those out. And that's what we saw at the Democratic National Committee. There is a violent, angry section of the Democratic Party that is pro-Palestinian, frankly, pro-Hamas, and they are now asserting themselves. And there are about 20 in the Democratic House Caucus that will vote against measures opposed to Hamas. And the rest of the party is terrified that the American people will see the Democratic Party as identifying with these people or not disciplining them. That's why I think they had to shut down this DNC protest, because if they didn't, there would be another protest the next day and the next day, and it would be in the news every day.
And assuming, John, that these protests continue, and of course, assuming that this conflict in the Middle East goes on, and I don't sadly see any end to that anytime soon, do you think that we could then see a replay in Chicago, where we're going to have the Democrat National Convention next year, of that famous 1968 convention in Chicago again for the Democrats, where you had anti-war protesters and the cops squaring off, and again it was chaos?
Well, you're a very good historian, James. We have an interesting historical parallel this year. A obscure congressman from Minnesota is challenging an incumbent president who's very low in the polls in the New Hampshire primary, and may have a surprise for that incumbent president. And that's the same thing that happened to Lyndon Johnson in 1968, Gene McCarthy. This year, it's Congressman Dean Phillips from Minnesota. And of course, the Chicago Convention was in Chicago in 1968, and now it's, of course, in Chicago again in 2024. And history could repeat itself. We could have a protesters' riot. We could have a police riot. We could have all kinds of things happening in Chicago because it's a highly combustible city.
Indeed, John, and I want to talk about now where the Democrats are sitting more broadly nationally, not just within the party. The Democrats are becoming less and less popular. Trump continues to pull well ahead in the polls. The latest Real Clear Politics average of polls has him at 46.5 to 45.2%. But crucially, swing states that Biden might have been able to count on are swinging Donald Trump's way. It's early yet, but the Democrats seem to be drifting towards oblivion. Sources I've talked to say that they know the election is unwinnable if it was held at this point. What is their next move on the Democrat side?
Well, the swing state polls that you referenced came out just before our off-year elections last week. And they panicked the Democratic Party. There were immediate calls for Biden to reconsider his decision to run and all of that. Those were temporarily stayed when the Democrats performed above expectations in the midterm elections in Virginia, New Jersey, and other places. But those concerns will continue to rise because the polls aren't budging and they're being confirmed by additional polls. I believe in the end, the Democratic Party realizes that it can either go down to a defeat up and down the ticket, or it can change the top of the ticket and hope that changes the conversation. I believe the Democratic Party will continue to try to find a way to convince Joe Biden not to run. And that may even involve, in the end, saying that the Hunter Biden thing is going to surface. That'll be a surprise, but the Democrats are that desperate. Now, the problem that creates for the Republicans is this. Biden runs very poorly against Donald Trump. But what if Joe Biden is not the Democratic nominee? Other Republicans do fairly well against most potential Democratic candidates, but Trump not so much. So that would create a bit of a controversy and a bit of a debate about electability inside the Republican Party as well if Joe Biden were not the nominee.
That's really interesting. So who do you think then, John Fund, they would go with? And would it come in the form of a superdelegate overruling of the primaries? Would it come in the form of somebody in the primaries being allowed to come in and challenge? What form do you think that would take?
I think there are two paths. One would be that Biden, like Lyndon Johnson in 1968, does very badly in the New Hampshire primary. In 68, LBJ left the race within 2 weeks. But if Biden were stubborn and were to continue, and his departure took place closer to the convention, you're right about the superdelegates. You're also right about the delegates themselves who would be newly empowered by this. They'd have the problem, as The Sound of Music would have it, when they have the song A Problem Called Maria, they'd have the problem called Kamala, because Kamala is not viewed as a strong candidate, and she is, shall we say, not viewed as their favorite potential presidential nominee. Then if they succeed in sidelining Kamala, then they have a problem, because 63% of Democratic primary voters, James, are either women or minorities, mostly blacks. And that would create a real problem in public perception inside the Democratic Party if you dumped the vice president, who was both a woman and African American. So then the question would become, would you pick a boring white guy like Gavin Newsom from California? He might not satisfy that. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, who has won twice in a swing state, is the smart money choice to replace Biden should that eventuality happen.
Indeed. Look, John, I think you're absolutely on the money there. Gretchen Whitmer is who I've been saying, and I think they're going to convince him to do an LBJ on that one. But we'll see in the weeks and months ahead. Now, I want to get on to this other crazy story here, John. And there was no shortage of drama on Capitol Hill this week when tensions boiled over at a Senate committee hearing between a Republican senator and a union boss. Take a look at this.
Quit the tough guy act in these Senate hearings. You know where to find me. Any place, anytime, cowboy. Sir, this is a time, this is a place. If you want to run your mouth, we can be two consenting adults. We can finish it here.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand your butt up.
Oh, hold on.
Big guy.
Oh, stop it.
Is that your solution every poll?
No, sit down. Sit down.
Okay.
You know, you're a United States Senator. Sit down.
Active.
Oh, okay.
Sit down, please.
All right.
Can I respond?
Hold it.
John Fund, what is going on in the Senate? That looked like an episode of the Jerry Springer Show.
You know, there's an old saying that Washington is Hollywood for ugly people. Well, I have another saying now. Washington is your old high school with money. Lots of money to spend, other people's money. This reminds me of high school, where the football team captain and the nerdy student body president get in on it and challenge each other to a fist fight. High school with money.
It's a good way to put it, John. And of course, you know, we've seen a few of those sort of incidents over the years and centuries in Washington, but pretty wild scenes. Thank you so much, John Fund, for breaking it all down for us.